Some people believe there's a giant octopus living in the lakes of Oklahoma, so I decided to go and try to find it myself. But first, I did some research on where this idea might have come from. According to the internet, the Oklahoma octopus is an octopus, but a giant one, the size of a horse with long reddish-brown tentacles, and sometimes people claim it has a shell or looks more like a shrimp with tentacles, but in general, it's just an octopus. 3 lakes are usually named as its home: Oolaga, Tenkiller, and Thunderbird, and websites talking about this monster usually claim that these lakes have an unusually high number of drownings, probably because of the giant man-eating monster. Now, there's a couple of issues with this idea. First, all of Oklahoma's lakes are freshwater, and no freshwater cephalopods are known to exist at all. Some people claim that maybe it evolved to live in freshwater since Oklahoma was covered in seawater 450 million years ago, but all of Oklahoma's lakes were man-made in the 1900s. Second is the size. In case you didn't know, horses are big. And if an octopus that large were living in what are pretty popular recreational lakes, there would probably be even more sightings, as well as a sizable effect on the local fish populations, which would be its primary source of food. So then where did this idea come from? Well, the first thing that always comes up is an episode of an old show called Lost Tapes that ran on Animal Planet from 2008 to 2010. It framed itself as a found footage documentary about cryptid encounters and included an episode on the Oklahoma octopus, which aired on January 13th, 2009. The episode follows a group of recent high school grads who go to a local lake to celebrate, only to have several of them pulled under the water by the monster octopus. Throughout the episode, small bits of information are shared about the legend, including basically everything you now see about it online. A side note about the local lake included in the episode: there is zero chance that this was actually filmed in Oklahoma. That water is way too clean. Yikes. So, was the whole thing just a creation of some writer for this television show? Well, it turns out there actually are a few mentions of its existence before that, like this 2007 article by Rob Lott of the Oklahoma Gazette, who wrote about a recently published book that claimed that it lived in Lake Thunderbird near Norman. He went around asking people if they'd ever heard of the legend, but nobody had. So I decided to buy that book. It's called Monster Spotter's Guide to North America by Scott Francis. And unfortunately, the entire entry on the Oklahoma octopus is just a few sentences, and it gives us no insight as to where the idea came from. But the description was almost identical to the one from the episode, suggesting to me that the writers of the Lost Tapes episode probably also had a copy of that book. A few others have also looked into the origins of the story, like the blog Inserte Cetus, written by Tyler Greenfield. In his post, he mentions a Daily Oklahoma article from 1982 about 2 people who were fishing in the Verdigris River and actually caught an octopus. The 34-inch octopus was dead when it was caught, and the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife said that they believed it was just dumped in the river. And for the record, I also found a similar story of an octopus being caught in Lake Tenkiller in 2020, this one about the size of a human hand. It was also dead when wildlife officials arrived. YouTuber Truth is Scarier Than Fiction also tried to find the story's origin and found an article in a 1987 edition of Info Journal written by a man named Russell Bates. In it, Bates discusses Native American legends of monsters living in underwater caverns who would pull people in, and interestingly, the description given by Bates is fairly close to the modern one. So, we have a few stories of dead octopi being pulled from Oklahoma's rivers and lakes, Native American legends about underwater cave monsters, but we don't have really any credible eyewitness sightings of a horse-sized monster pulling people under. What Oklahoma does have, however, are some pretty monster-sized fish. For example, the largest fish ever caught in the state was a 254-pound, 97 3/4-inch alligator gar. Given how murky Oklahoma's lakes are known to be, I could easily see how one of these giants swimming by could make people think that there was a monster in the water. To figure out what, if anything, people are seeing, I decided to drive down to Lake Thunderbird myself. I didn't have the money for an underwater drone, so I had to rig something up for myself. I took this remote-controlled boat and attached a small underwater kid's camera to the bottom. I then tied on this sonar fish finder bobber, which connected to my phone and would tell me how deep the water was and, more importantly, if there were any creatures swimming around. The next part of my plan was to use these octopus lures I got off of Amazon. While researching, I found that octopi would attack other octopi who were encroaching on their territory, so if my goal was to find the Oklahoma octopus, what better way than by making it think it had competition? So I cast my line and drove my boat surveillance system to monitor the waters. And after waiting and pulling the line in and casting it back out and then waiting some more, it became obvious that nothing in the lake was interested in me at all. And normally in ghost or monster hunting shows, this is where they overhype even the slightest thing to make you think for a moment that maybe they were able to catch something, but literally nothing happened while I was there. After a few hours of waiting and watching these birds, I decided it was time to call it a day. Nothing showed up on the sonar, but I had hope that maybe something would show up on the underwater camera, so I went back to my car to check. There was nothing. The footage is just green. No reddish brown tentacles, no horse-sized monsters, no Oklahoma octopus. At the end of the day, I've never met anybody from Oklahoma who actually takes the octopus myth seriously, no matter how many times it pops up on these internet cryptid lists. And while there may be one or two obscure tales of small, dead octopi being pulled out of the Sooner State waters, the entirety of what we associate with this entity really seems to exist solely because of a single episode of a cable television show, which itself was probably inspired by a couple of unsourced sentences in a random book.